Okay, I just recorded like 13 minutes of this video, and then I got a really important call that I couldn't deny. Anyway, so I got ideas for weapon moves. And the crux is less kind of exactly what I was talking about before, where, you've got all these like particular moves that have all these bigger dramatic effects. I I'm kind of for this. I'm thinking more along the lines of these are like at will things you can do that don't cost any resources, but they have different blends of properties. So what got me thinking about these were I was thinking about fighting games. Big surprise, Soul Calibur in particular, but in a game like Soul Calibur, you've got your whole move set available to you all at once. But all of those moves have different blends of startup. They do deal different amounts of damage. They have different effects on hit, on block, on whiff, which are the three main case scenarios in which an attack in something like Soul Calibur resolves. So you might have a move that's like really quick, but offers very little. It's really quick and really safe, meaning it comes out quick, it recovers quickly. There's not much your opponent can do to you, even if they predict perfectly what you're going to do. Otherwise, you might have another move that comes out really slowly, or like it might come out slowly and have really good reward and be okay in like on block, but because it's really slow, a lot of the time if you use it in inappropriate situations, your opponent can physically react to it. They don't have to predict at all. They can just be standing there like, oh, you're doing this stupid slow move, sidestep you and launch you for free. So it's those moves aren't good to throw out without some kind of prep. Like if your opponent can react to it and step and punish it on reaction, you should stop doing it in neutral. And then other moves might be fast to come out. Your opponent can't visually react to them, but on block, they're really bad. They're punishable on block. They're highly negative. If your opponent is just sitting there blocking, you throw this move out, they block it. Now they can do their own launcher for free, or just hit you for free with something. So that's another case scenario. There's a lot of different exact situations you can be in, and the frame data in those games determines what's going on. But it was really the idea of different blends of properties that I was thinking about. So, and I think a closer example of what I want to get at is boxing and the different kind of colloquial names for different kinds of punches. And the main ones we're looking at, because I don't know how far down it goes, how far down the rabbit hole goes, but you got jabs, straights, hooks, uppercuts, haymakers. And these are, oh man, hurt my neck because I'm old. So what do these different punches do? Something like a jab it's fast to come out, it's low commitment. You throw a jab out, and most of the time you're throwing jabs out to interact with your opponent's guard. You're seeing how tight their guard is, how they respond when they block a punch, when they knock a punch out of the way, things like that. But they can't really punish you too hard if they block it perfectly or they get into a perfect position and parry it and whatever. Whereas something like a straight it follows the same kind of line. It's a straight, direct punch, but it's a little slower and there's more power behind it. It has more commitment. This is something your opponent might be able to punish you for if they read it perfectly. And small definition, when I say read, that's like a educated guess, a prediction of how your opponent's going to move. It's, oh, they're going to do a straight right here. Like they're cocking their arm back in just the right way to do a straight. So I'm going to prepare my guard to block a straight perfectly and counterattack with my own straight in their open line. That's kind of what a read is. Whereas in like a fighting game, it's okay, they just blocked this move, meaning I'm -6, so it's their turn. I'm thinking they're gonna do this launcher that's punishable on block, so I'll just block here. And oh, yep, they did it. Okay, punish. It's different, but so something like a straight is something that could potentially be punishable, but only on like a perfect read, something like that. Then you've got something like a hook where it's, similar-ish power, like it's, I guess, normal levels of power. The hook, but it comes around and hits around your opponent's guard. So what it mostly lets you do is just land a hit bypassing defense. But in doing so, you potentially leave whatever side you're hooking, you leave that side open. And if your opponent is in perfectly neutral, they're on their guard, they're not like recovering from something you just hit them with, then they might be able to just pop you straight in your open line on reaction, probably with a jab, but I mean, you don't want to get hit with anything. So that's like the detriment of something like a hook. Whereas then you've got something like an uppercut. An uppercut punch that comes in from below. It's kind of similar to a hook. You aim to get around your opponent's guard, but unlike a hook, an uppercut hits the human body where it's got a big weakness, because the human body is built to resist forces pushing down on it, not necessarily forces pushing up on it. So there's no real way to like uppercuts are gonna fucking hurt. Like they're gonna ring your bell. Like that's just how they work. So something like an uppercut in something like 5e might have like an increased crit threshold. It might resist, or it might ignore damage resistance. It might ignore AC. It might, any number of things. It might get around shields. Like there could be anything like that. So then you've got something like a haymaker, which is a lot like a straight, but it comes down at this goofy angle that if your opponent is just on guard, they're just gonna, what are you doing? What the fuck? Stop that. Why are you doing that? It's just a really bad idea to do that, baby. It's just a really bad idea to do it. But a lot of the time, your opponent can get so focused on one other things that they're looking for that they might ignore the quote stupid option. And you can nail them with a haymaker at a goofy angle and ring their bell. And this is kind of what I'm thinking about right now, like having these kinds of options available to you. They're not necessarily more or less powerful than just attacking normally, but you get different blends of properties. So one of the first things I came up with was a downward cut. And because the difference between using weapons and using swords is the idea of like haymakers and uppercuts are kind of flipped. An uppercut with a sword is like a really goofy attack. It doesn't really work. It's a bad position to start a cut from. Your hand position you have to twist it all the way around and point your sword down to swing up, especially if it's a single-edged sword. But it's such a goofy angle that it can catch your opponent off guard if they're looking for other things. Whereas a downward cut, it's not super difficult to defend against a downward cut. You just move your weapon up, but it's got so much more power behind it than other types of cuts that it effectively is difficult to guard against. It crashes through parries. You basically can't parry a good downward cut. And by parry, I mean the quicker nudge a weapon out of the way. Like where you just knock it out of the way mildly and it goes off kilter and it doesn't strike you. Not like the big dramatic where like a Dark Souls parry or something like that. Whereas, so for the sake of this, the softer thing might be more like a deflect where you just bink, bink, bink. Whereas a parry would be the more dramatic, you reverse your opponent's position and physically knock their weapon back, something more dramatic. So you basically can't parry and knock a downward cut back. It's like, it's not going to happen. The best you can do is deflect it slightly and move out of the way at the same time. Because a downward cut will often have so much power and momentum behind it. It's just a bad idea to interact with directly. So for a downward cut, no penalties to attack. You deal increased damage. That could be anything. Increase, like add an extra damage die, add a bonus flat damage, whatever you want to say. Just more damage. So it's like this heavier damaging option. But can't be parried, whatever parried may or may not mean in the system. To be determined later. But if it misses, then you provoke an opportunity attack directly. You just leave yourself open immediately. And your opponent, if it misses, your opponent can just stab you. So you risk taking another attack on you in exchange for potentially getting more damage directly. You don't have a higher chance to hit or anything like that. But you can blow through some defensive options and get a bonus of bigger damage at the cost of potentially generating an additional attack against you. That's something that could be used strategically because sometimes you may want to try to burn a monster's reaction so somebody else can just walk away without having to disengage. But, that's higher level strategy type stuff. But ultimately, this is something a trained fighter might use in, and I say capital fighter, fighter class, might use in particular situations. They need to eliminate a particular target faster. They need to get the attention on them. Whereas something like a barbarian might just do this. It's bigger damage. I don't give a shit if you attack me anyway. So that's a way that barbarians can squeeze a little extra damage out because, this isn't the case in our tables because barbarians tend to get the most damaging weapons. That's all homebrew stuff. In base 5e, for a lot of optimization, barbarians are kind of lacking and they are forced to use Great Weapon Master. They're the best user of it, but they have to use Great Weapon Master. This is something that could kind of help along those lines. So something like a downward cut would, like I just said, all those properties, but have the detriment of potentially generating an attack against you. Whereas something like another attack, a thrust. These types of attacks it's a lot like a straight. It's direct into the opponent's line, but with a sword, a thrust usually has a lot of other properties, like it can get through lighter armor. So unless you're wearing plate mail, even if you're wearing scale mail, something like, quote, medium armor, a thrust might be able to rip right through it and just stab you anyway. But at the same time, a deep thrust like that, it can leave you overextended. That's the word I want to use. It takes you out of your guarded position and puts your weapon way into your opponent's line. And if you miss, or if they parry it appropriately, you're almost at their mercy. Think what happens when you have a spear and you thrust in. You do like a high-powered thrust, lots of momentum, and your opponent might move in past your spear, and now they're kind of they're to the side a little bit, but they're between your spearhead and you. And they've got like a mace or some one-handed weapon and a shield, and they're starting to bind up your spear shaft with their offhand, like whatever they have in it, and that mace is coming to your head. So something like that, instead of just copying the idea of the downward thrust, or the downward attack, or the downward cut. Something like this attack might ignore light and medium armor. So how would that mechanically work? It would ignore AC bonuses from all but the heaviest of armor. Kind of like the chain property from the Nox's homebrew chain property from the 40k game, where that gains extra attacks versus all but the heaviest armor. So, but what is the heaviest armor? Well, that's narratively determined, more or less. So basically, dudes wearing leather or any kind of medium armor, this will get bonuses to. It ignores their AC and just lands. Maybe it has a higher crit threshold because thrusts are generally aimed at vital areas instead of just attacking your body generally. So you'd have those two benefits. You'd ignore big chunks of armor and have a higher crit threshold. But what would be the detriments? Well, probably if it misses, then what I wrote down was your next attack is at disadvantage against that target, and that target's next attack against you is at advantage. So it's kind of like a mini reckless attack for a few small bonuses. And, these are just like preliminary ideas I had for these kinds of attacks. That kind of thing. And then another one I had was a low strike. And this is more directly copied from something like a fighting game, but from the boxing example, it'd be more like a hook. It does like mildly reduced damage, but you just get advantage on the attack. That kind of thing. You just generate advantage on this attack, but it does slightly reduced damage. I forget what I wrote down for negatives besides the reduced damage. I can't remember what it was. At all. I think it was you can't use this attack if you're at disadvantage. So if you're at disadvantage, you just can't use this at all. Something like that. And then if it misses, something happens. I can't remember what. Maybe it also just generated an opportunity attack, something like that. Then some other like looser ideas I have, something like a breaker attack, something that that you're going to aim at more defensive options, like somebody's taking the dodge action. You use this, it would deal you wouldn't deal any damage die. Think of it like you're smacking somebody with the pommel of your weapon or the shaft of your spear when they're like binding up. So you're knocking their shield around, you're forcefully knocking their weapon to the side, that kind of thing. So you would do that, but you would maybe gain a bonus to your next attack. It would do increased damage, or you would ignore disadvantage imposed by the dodge action, things like that. You'd ignore certain kinds of AC bonuses. And then a funny idea I had was to impose temporary exhaustion, because when your weapon is knocked to the side like that, it's difficult for you to get back to your highly defensive position. So while a single level of exhaustion, like if you're using 5e style, then the single level just, it imposes disadvantage on ability checks. Woo. That's not important, but like the playtest version where exhaustion was a negative modifier on basically everything. So and it went up, instead of 6 levels, it went to 10 levels. So it was 1 level of exhaustion, you got a -1. 2 levels, -2. So it could be something like that, but there's options. But but circling back, the whole idea of this is to give you different options besides swinging your weapon normally. That's kind of the idea I have behind this. I'm going to flesh out some more ideas I have, and then I might implement this in Site 27. So I think I've only got 2 marshals in that, but they would have these options, something like that. How they work for exactly how would you determine what can do what? So similar to what I was talking about in the last few videos, different weapons would have access to different ones. Like, a longsword would have access to like the downward cut, the thrust, the low attack maybe. Whereas something like an axe or a mace would not have access to a thrust. But it would have access to the downward cut. Maybe the low attack, the breaker, that kind of thing. Maybe you could know a number of these per weapon equal to your proficiency bonus, that kind of thing. You could maybe proficiency bonus +1. Who knows? Some kind of system, just so you have a few of these, so you have options. In addition to just being able to attack normally. Because I'm sure there's some situations where it'll be like, okay, the downward cut, not going to be as useful here. I could do... I can do extra damage, but I want to stay safer. I don't want to generate extra attacks from this monster. There was... I can't remember what it was. There was one where it came up like you give up... It would be kind of like Great Weapon Master, where you impose a penalty to your attack roll, but you get some benefit. I called it flurry attack. It would be you take a penalty to your... to hit roll, and if your attack hits, you can make another attack. And you can keep doing this. You can gain a number of additional attacks on your turn equal to your proficiency bonus. So, at level 1, you could do, or at low levels, you could do up to 2 additional attacks. Or generate 2 additional flurry attacks. So at higher levels, it wouldn't factor in extra attack. But then proficiency bonus goes up, you can generate 3. And especially at level 5, where you have extra attack, you get 2 attacks normally, you could make both of them flurries. So flurry, you hit, you get an extra 1. That hits. So you try to land a second flurry attack. But that one misses. Okay, well, you make your extra attack also flurry attack. And then that one hits, generates your second flurry attack. Then you do that one, it hits, you generate your third flurry attack, and then you don't get any more. So you can get an extra 3 attacks there. Right? Or no, well, one of them missed, so that wouldn't count. Math. That's stuff that can be kind of tweaked and figured out later. But that's kind of things like that are kind of the idea. Yeah, that's all I got today.